if your market is really more than probably 1,000 people, like let's say, for example, jet ski buyers, for example, you got that all over the world, like plenty of countries, then it's not that hard, really. Just try 100. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com.
Hey, Jack, just before we start, I've been doing some thinking lately. You know, our podcast won't be legit until we have a sponsor, right?
Okay, but haven't we been turning down sponsors?
I know, but it's hard to recommend something you and I don't use often, and we're already promoting the crap out of our services.
Fair point, but what about the course we just released? Wouldn't you recommend that to our listeners?
Yeah, for sure I would. All right, so how would we start?
Well, for starters, I wouldn't mention that it took us over a year and 3 trips to Japan and Switzerland to record the thing.
All right, let's not do that. But at minimum, I would want to mention where they can find the course. Like, let's put it to, I don't know, course.quickmail.io. Would that work for you?
It works, and then I could share what a few of those early students had to say about it. Like the one from Damien, who said it was by far the best course on cold outbound I've ever taken. Or what did Chris say? The week on sales research and targeting prospects blew my mind. Yeah, we definitely want that in there.
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of too easy. You know, people always say nice things when they get results. And at some point, we're going to have to come up with some hard sell copywriting materials of our own. And you know, I'm not that great at that. So I don't know, what would you put on the page?
Okay, how about this? Imagine that instead of getting ignored by prospects day after day, you could just follow a course that shows you how to book meetings with dream clients and automate the entire outbound process so you can focus on closing deals and scaling your company. Plus, there's that money-back guarantee and the 8 modules and the bonus podcast interviews. But so far, so good?
Yeah, I like it, man. But you know, I like your style. So anyway, all right, it's getting a bit late. So can we podcast now and review that later?
Yeah, but at least promise me that course.quickmail.io is finally live and people can finally try out the course right now.
Yeah, sure. I already put it live, and just so you know, I added that special price we discussed about for our podcast listener, and then we can leave it here until, you know, we're happy with the landing page. Sounds fair enough?
Yeah, let's do it.
Imagine for a moment that you have a product that is absolutely loved by your users. But those users have zero purchasing power. In other words, they can't really buy the software themselves. They have to go to their manager or someone else in the organization. So who should you approach for your cold email campaign? Should you reach out to the CFO, CTO, CEO with the purchasing power, or to the developer, designer, support person that uses the software? There are more than meet the eyes when it comes to choosing the prospect you are going after. So stay tuned as Jack and I are answering today's listener question. Enjoy. Jack, today
We got a question.
Yeah, we got a question. Awesome.
Yeah, submitted by a loyal listener. And if you have a question, you should send it to us, podcast@quickmail.io. Send us your questions. We might do a cast about it. Jeremy, you want to give a shout out to the person who sent this message in?
I'm not sure he will want to, but let's just say it's called Christoph.
So what did Christoph say?
Yeah, well, his question is he's trying to sell a product, but he's wondering, should I actually go to the junior person who is using the product but may not have any buying power? Or should I go to the decision maker and try to pitch my product directly? So who should I go to? So my decision maker is not the user, final end user of the product, but he has this, he has the budget, and the other one doesn't. It's the opposite. So
Okay. So can you think of a tool? We don't have to use Christoph's. I'm thinking maybe he's made something for developers, but the developer's not the decision maker. Maybe it's, I don't know.
So true. Developers are never part of the decision making. So that's
right.
That's a good example. Okay, let's say it's a developer.
But who decides? You would know this question. Who decides to approve of a purchase for a development team? Is it like CTO or finance or?
Well, here's the thing. I think it depends largely on the amount. You know, are we talking like $100 product? Like, for example, we've been using Beyond Compare for a very long time. This is a tool for comparing different files, which is super useful when you're merging different code base and stuff like that. Or are we talking about like, massive infrastructure, new servers, that costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah.
That is very different who you're going to. I think depending on the budget, then you're going to go, higher in the hierarchy. And, obviously depending on the size of the company and how flat or hierarchical it is.
Right. Yeah, good point. But for the sake of the discussion, let's say we're selling a mid-level product. It's not a new server or, something that's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe it's, I don't know, $500 a month.
100 a month?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so let's say between 100 and 500 a month, okay?
Cool.
So for that level, I don't think the CTO necessarily needs to be involved unless this is a small company. Then the CTO is, having hands on everything. But otherwise, I think for that level, then it's probably the direct manager or the upper manager. One of those two will probably handle that.
Okay, so let me get this clear. To answer Christoph's question, you see it as a function of how much it costs. If it's low value, if you think a developer may be able to get something approved because it's relatively inexpensive, then you might say approach end user. And if it's more expensive, then simply reach out to upper management?
Not necessarily. I think this is to determine who's the decision maker, right? Who is the person with the budget at the end? Because it could be close or it could be far, from the actual end user.
Good point. So in other words, your end user and decision maker may be the same person if your price point is low enough.
That's right. I mean, for a $10 product or $100 product as a one-time payment,
don't bother me with that.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. It's just like, I know actually for a fact that some developer actually bought, the thing from their own pocket because they couldn't wait for the upper management to make any decision.
I'm sure about it.
So,
Okay.
But now we're talking, recurring stuff and most likely 100 between 500. Then you don't want to pay that from your own pocket, I think.
Yeah, I can think of quite a few APIs that are in that price point that you probably want the company to put the money up for that. Okay, so I've got a little bit different theory on who to approach, but I'm interested to see where your next step is. So let's say you figure out the price point and it could be made by, let's say, the developer's senior level person, right? Is that all you need to know to figure out, all right, just reach out to them? I mean, talk me through that.
Whoa. Listeners are going to hate me because there are multiple variables to this as well. The other question you will have to ask yourself is generally your product, do you actually sell it in one go or is it actually a multi-touch type of product? Like, is the sales cycle, just very short, people try, they love it, they're okay, fits their need, they buy it? Or do you actually need to educate your user and that takes some time and, maybe it's a 6-month sales cycle, needs to talk to 5, 6, 7 person.
Interesting.
And then in this case, the question really is, who do I start with more than actually who's the decision maker? Like, do I start from the top or do I start from the bottom? And I think you got some ideas on this one, right? From your own experience and your agency.
Yeah, so I have tried both. And what I feel at this point works best, and feel is probably the right word because it's a little tricky to gather data for this question in some regards. But here's where I'm at with this. Why did you make that tool? If you made it because the users in the marketplace had a common pain point that was really a pain in the ass, and you decided to be the first person to solve that, then I would say go after the end users because that's the major pain point that you're bringing. If you took a look at all the, APIs out there and decided there needed to be one that did X because you heard developers just ranting about how much of a pain it was to use the existing tools, then yeah, go to the end user. On the other hand, if your tool is particularly useful because it saves a company money, it makes a company faster, it reduces the risk that a CFO would have to take because it's highly secured. If that's the case, I say go straight to the top and pitch them on those benefits.
That's a great example. Like, imagine you have something more secure. Developer may not really care that much, right?
But the CFO would.
The upper management, yes, exactly.
Right. In fact, I mention this because I've sold very technical solutions to CFOs before because we presented it as a financial problem, not a development problem. And fortunately, when you bring that up and you make a CFO care about something, you've made a decision maker care about something, which helps the sales process dramatically.
That's a great point. Different layer will have different receptor, or like you will need to communicate benefits differently,
Right.
right? So for the developer, you may say that's going to remove your frustration. And for the CTO, is your team's going to be more productive.
There you go.
And then that's going to cost less for your CFO. So depending on your target, you're going to have to change your benefit anyway, right? And I remember the other thing as well is that if you're actually starting with the developer, because like you're mentioning, that's a big problem in the industry, and then the developer are getting frustrated by that and so on. I would say that's also your responsibility to help them upsell their own team. So you come up with a great deck, a great sales deck or some material that they can pass on. And this is the strategy that Perforce used. Perforce is a system, a file management versioning system for coding. And so that was before, GitHub became like the sort of like number one space. And it addressed a really big problem that team had and were getting frustrated by using, Microsoft tools in the past. And so that's the strategy they went for. It's like they did like a super awesome product and they went full on, not just developers. And then the developers had to do this, the upsell.
Yeah, I think that's what Stripe did. Right. I think they were the payment processing tool for developers, and they went straight to developers because they knew those were the people that would be implementing a payment processing thing in the site. Kind of smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it only worked, and Jeremy, you're a great person to double check this with, but I think that approach only worked because PayPal was letting developers down so much. Is that true?
Oh my God. PayPal and Stripe is like day and night.
There you go.
One, you never wish you actually met that stuff. And the other one, you're just like, married and happy, happy couple with.
Right.
I freaking hated using PayPal. It's just horrible.
Okay. My theory is Stripe became what it is today because they realized a huge pain in the marketplace and went straight to the people having that frustration with a better way. It would not work if PayPal was very technical and very easy to use.
That's correct. I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just a takeaway at the midway point or maybe a little bit further, if you really are solving a problem for the end user that's going to get them excited enough to maybe champion this product to the rest of the company, that's a great place to start. It's also arguably the best place you can go to hear feedback. So even if you're not getting a sold kind of reply from the end user, chances are that's a very productive conversation to have so that you can improve the tool, so that you can make it something that they would go to bat for and push to the rest of their company.
Yeah, and even if you actually go for the top management, let's say you got like something like, reduce the cost, drastically and so on, you're still going to need to have adoption from the actual end users, right?
Yeah.
Even if they don't have the buying power. Because if the end user keeps on ranting every day about that stuff, you're going to have massive churn anyway. So
I don't know, man. I know several companies that use tools because their advisor said you're using these tools.
Oh, you mean like Salesforce?
Like Salesforce, like HubSpot. Yeah, like people need to use what their boss tells them to use or get out, kind of, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's a bit of truth. I mean, I've been in plenty of companies and we used to joke about like, it must be a golf buddy of the CEO, those sort of things. So,
right.
But it builds resentment, right? You can be sure that if, someone starts a company, then they probably wouldn't advertise, just going for this tool anyway.
It's true. Hopefully you have both. But let's talk about helping the end user champion your tool here, because I think that's more to it than just handing them a deck and wishing them best of luck.
Yeah, you're right in a sense that, but now we are going into longer sales cycle when you actually need to touch multiple people in the company and then maybe have a call with them. So ideally, you want that person to be your champion. You don't want just that person to just be excited about it and then just give them deck and then go for it. You want to basically get as much information as you need from that person. It's like, hey, in your company, just try to understand, how you guys are structured, who would actually be the decision maker on. If that person is a champion for your product, they will help you out. They will help you out solve this equation about like how best to sell to my company. And that may mean like, who needs to be in this meeting next? What do they care about most? Those sort of questions you can always ask them. And if you got this end user championing your product, I think you're already in a great position.
I work with a VP of sales, one of my clients. He's selling a high ticket item. And his rule is if a champion will not agree to let him sit in on that first meeting with them and the decision maker, then he basically says this person is not really a champion. And he's using that as a filter because there's some fake champions out there that tell you the world, but then...
Yeah, dude, I love your tool. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable talking to my boss.
So I would be, if you're selling something north of $10,000, you should insist on being at every meeting between you and your champion and the decision maker, if possible. Why? Because that's your job. Nobody else communicates the problem, not solution so much, but nobody can communicate the problem that you're solving better than your CEO, your VP sales. You need to be there.
Not everyone is a salesperson, and that person, that developer, is going to talk about his own problem and not really highlight, dude, you're going to be able to save, 30% of. That's not going to happen. They're not going to communicate their language. You need to be there. That's for sure.
Right. And okay, so let's say someone's listening and they're like, my product is about $100 a month. I'm not really going to sit on every meeting. What can I do to better my chances beyond just like a slide deck that I share? Any tips for them?
Well, first of all, I think that's stupid. If you're selling $100 a month, you should sit on that meeting until you reach a certain level of, monthly recurring revenue. If you don't do that at the beginning, I think, just give up, do something else, do a pet project if you like to build stuff.
Why?
Because at the beginning, you're going to have to actually learn about that market. And if you don't talk to people, you're never going to find out. So that's the first thing. It's not like you build and then you hope for people to come. That never works.
Okay, so let's say somebody already has sold this 100 times. They have 100 happy users, but they have other things, right?
Okay, then that's the next stage. Yeah, you're right. That's the next stage. Is like now you're at the stage of scaling.
Do you have to hire somebody that will sit in on that meeting?
Potentially. The other thing is that at this stage, I think you already figured out what works. And then you probably figured out, how you can scale it. That could be through retargeting. That could be through
a better trial.
Better trials, onboarding, or that could be, through effectively someone sitting, like someone just doing demos, like onboarding demos, like 20 minutes. Right. It could be done by your support person potentially. But what's interesting and a lot of people are not necessarily thinking of is like you may have a product that is $100 a month, but if you think about your business model, you can go for something like Trello, for example, right? Not that you should do Trello necessarily, but they go for a full premium model, which basically means they wait until everyone adopts it. And then the upper management say, hold on a second, we're adopting this tool, everyone's using it, everyone's loving it, and it's already part of the company, but it doesn't have security mandatory or some extra stuff.
Right.
And that's really where Trello makes their money, is that, people suddenly want single sign-on or some double two-factor authentication, those sort of extra things that a company would want at the larger thing, a larger adoption.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it's just like everyone just use that like as a free tool.
So don't charge until most of the team is already too far down the rabbit hole to switch to another tool.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, honestly, if you're the business owner and then you got like, 10 teams and then 6 of them are already using their tool in their own corner, you're going to say at some point, okay, guys, let's standardize stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really when, the sales comes in. And yeah, and then that's the strategy of Trello. That's how they've been doing their business model.
I think same with Zapier, same with Notion. That's like I guess it works.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's one. That's a long game. And if you want to actually go even longer game, and I know you remember this example, Jack, because you just reminded me before the podcast, but you could do what 3ds Max did, which is basically you may have, for developers specifically, then you may have a lot of schools for development, a lot of boot camp, a lot of things like that. What you can do is effectively give your tool for free so they get so used to this tool that they come straight away out of school and they're already like trained on that tool. So people on the market will just realize that, okay, I got lots of people already very well trained and highly skilled in this tool already. What's the point in going to another tool? And then it becomes a de facto, tool that everyone using. But that's a very long strategy, and
right.
It's been operated very well by 3ds Max.
It reminds me of the story how Folgers brought coffee to Japan. I was saving it for when we were recording, but here's the brief story.
Oh yeah, tell me this one.
Yeah, so Folgers, I don't know, in the 70s or something, is making a lot of coffee, selling it to different countries, and decides Japan's their next hot market. So they bring coffee to Japan in the 70s and they don't sell nothing, right? Like it just flops. There are tea drinkers there, get lost Folgers. So they have a board meeting. The execs get together and say, how are we going to bring Japan to become our next biggest consumer of coffee? And I believe this is a true story. It's kind of crazy. So what they decided was they're like, well, there's no taste for coffee at the moment. So what we're going to do is make coffee flavored candy. Or we're going to approach Japan again and say, hey, we're a candy company. Here's candy. Sell it to the kids. They're going to love it. The kids.
Oh, man, that's a very clever
It's
trick.
evil. No?
Yeah.
So the kids grow up enjoying their candy flavored coffee. And then in about 15, 20 years later.
Yeah, 20, 30 years, strategy. So depending.
Exactly. They come back. Hey, how about coffee? And now you can get a very good espresso in Tokyo, even though you'll get kicked out if you're not a coffee drinker, Jeremy.
True story.
True story. Okay, so that's the long game, but maybe we can do like a quick recap here. So let's say, I don't know, everyone in your market is into peanut butter and you come out with almond butter because it's way, healthier. Then sell it to direct users. Get them to champion, help them bring it to the decision maker, either by showing up in person with them for the meeting or giving them the support they need to infiltrate more of the company, so to speak, like Trello, so that they kind of have to adopt it.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, if your market is really more than probably 1,000 people, like let's say, for example, jet ski buyers, for example, you got that all over the world, like plenty of countries, then it's not that hard, really. Just try 100 at the, user level, 100 at the, exec level.
Right.
And then just tune your messages and then see which one has the most traction. And you may end up, but look at the overall funnel, because it may end up that you're getting more responses from the bottom one. And then it turns out that it's actually the higher one that actually convert more, right?
You will. That's given. So another thing I would probably do is collect testimonials from the decision maker, not the end user. Okay, making it a lot easier to approach a VP finance about a technology if you've got two other CFOs touting how much it saved their company. That would help you a great amount to reach decision makers. Maybe even get referrals too. It's not a bad idea if your decision makers in finance, see if they are connected with other people that you'd like to do business with.
Yeah, I like that, especially at high level. It's not that many degree of separation between all the CFO,
right,
all the CTO, they kind of know each other to some extent.
Especially within the same industry. It's a pretty small world when you start thinking through segments. Okay, cool. So did we help Christoph? Is this the mic drop response to his question, who to approach?
It's just a 20 minutes mic drop response. Hopefully that's been helpful to you, Christoph, and thanks for asking the question.
Yeah, so if you have a question that you want Jeremy and I to talk great length about, send us your question, podcast@quickmail.io. And if it's a really good one, we'll make an episode about it and give you a shout out. So yeah, thanks, Christoph.
Otherwise, we'll do a rapid fire.
Very true.
Jack, great cast.
Great cast, man. Let's wrap things up talking about who to approach for your cold email campaigns. First, consider who's really benefiting, the end user or the company itself. Then write campaigns with unique selling points for both groups and test your response. And if you're selling technology, think of ways that you can force your decision makers to adopt your tool using the premium model strategies from examples like Trello and Zapier. And finally, remember to get referrals from other decision makers if you want to improve your chances of getting a yes from someone who can sign off on the sale.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high five by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher, or TuneIn, that works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.